you, Dr. Puttul Sathe. A very warm welcome from the Research Center for Women's Studies, SNDT Women's University. So today is the 13th session of this month-long series on gender sensitization and capacity development program, which is organized by RCWS in collaboration with UGC. So over this month-long program, we had eminent people from various fields, social activists, policy influencers, academicians, international experts, and thought leaders. So today our esteemed speaker is Professor Anita Ghai. She is the country's leading disability rights activist and an academician. She is currently a professor at School of Human Studies, Ambedkar University, Delhi. She was also the former president of the Indian Association for Women's Studies. Professor Ghai has been engaged with the field of disability studies for many years, and her contribution to the field is considered seminal. Her volume, Disability in South Asia, Knowledge and Experience, is considered a significant step forward and a milestone, the first of its kind in South Asia. Through her work, she analyzes disability, gender, and brings thoughtful reflection on identity politics. She also conducts workshops on sexuality and disability as part of an online course run by feminist organization Kriya. Ghai was among the few feminists to write about how the PCPNDT Act is harmful to disabled children since it allows abortion after testing for a fetal anomaly. She recognizes how sometimes feminism and disability are at odds with each other through her writing and research. She strongly advocates for accessibility, which is a big issue for the disabled people in India. Welcome, Professor Anita Ghai. Just a small request to all participants to mute their audios and videos while the lecture is on. Welcome, Professor.
How much time do I have, Sangeeta?
It's approximately 40 minutes, and then 10 minutes will be for question and answers.
That's okay. That's okay.
You can exceed also, Dr. Ghai. Frankly speaking, we would love to listen to you. So,
sorry?
I said you can exceed the time. We would love to listen to you.
No, it's okay. All right. So, thank you very much, Puttul, and thank you, SNDT University. And I'm happy to see Veena ji today, and Sangeeta ji, and everyone. I really feel honored and to be a part of. It seems as if it's also my university as well, because I've come there so often. So I think it's really. I think I really feel honored and privileged, to be able to share some of my thoughts, because today we thought that we would also relate it to the COVID and the situations that have been kind of, created in entire world. But of course, here we would be talking specifically about India. And also women with disabilities who are specifically kind of, I can kind of think about them. So what I would do is I'll divide it in two parts. One where I would just simply talk about women with disabilities and some of the, thoughts that are there, which I'll share, and then I'll come to some of the surveys that have been done, in for example, Nidhi Goel, and they did it in collaboration. And there are some, parts which are very important, which I also will share. So both, I think I'll just combine. As I think everybody knows, but for those who don't know, I just want to say that my epistemic location is there of a woman with visible mobility impairment, and both as an academician and advocate, I would like to share my thoughts about disability and gender in context of the coronavirus. Disability studies, as I think, not many universities take it up, but the one which they do would know that disability studies is a formal area of academic inquiry and has been making significant strides in both global north as well as global south, more in global north, but less in global south. But I suppose since maybe the last 10 years or so, with a rigorous interdisciplinary scholarship and the emergence of several fully fledged academic programs. I want to begin with some of the questions that come, which are, for example, and which I think the audience also might be interested in, asking that. For instance, as a disabled woman, my own location in the field is complicated because it raises perturbing yet important questions. For example, what is my stance as an academician and activist? With what authority can I speak about disability and disability studies, and why? Am I speaking with disabled people or about them? What language do I use to describe disability? Who has the power to name? How does understanding of disability studies exclude others from speaking out? And similarly, issues of diagnosis, its reliability and certification are very, very important. So I want to say, why disability? Why do we think about disability? Because disability is the other of ability versus disability, a binary, and the feminine gender is the other of, like we say, masculine and feminine, binary. Of course, I do have problems about the binaries also, to which I will come later, but just to kind of say that both disability and gender, though are contested categories, because they are transient and fluid in nature. So the binary part will always be criticized, in one sense. Both identities can become the basis of oppression and discriminatory experiences. I mean, women also experience that, and disabled women also experience the same. So in that particular sense, they both the identities are oppressive and are discriminatory. And as markers of identity, both categories are intersectional and have an element of performance. How do we kind of perform in society, and how do we kind of function in that particular sense? Some background. I mean, I won't kind of repeat what I've already kind of there have been many lectures in which I have, but just to kind of give a small background, that disabled women occupy a multifarious and a marginalized position in Indian society based on their disability and also on socio-cultural identities that separate them into identities constructed according to intersections with caste, class, residential position, even within a country, a city like Delhi or Mumbai, the slum areas, where the issues are there. So for women as well as disabled women, the rise of the neoliberal states have deepened or has deepened already severe oppression and exclusion on the base of the bodily ability and gender. I just want to give one example out here. I had my friend and I did go through cancer, as many of you know, but this was before cancer, where we were only interested in kind of, trying to check out that whether, any of kind of, let's say, educated enough to kind of, find out that whether there can be disease or not. So my friend and I, we went to this hospital, and incidentally, the doctor was my friend's aunt also. So we both got a mammogram done, and after the mammogram was over, I was sitting and I asked the doctor that where is my friend. So she said she's gone for the pap smear, testing. So I said that, but why, you haven't sent me. So she said that, but you are not married. No, you're single, So pap smear, for you, pap smear is not needed, Now, I think that in itself was amazing because, either I should have been open enough to tell her or not tell her or whatever, that whether I can be, sexuality can be, tied up to my personality as well, or it's not tied at all. I mean, what exactly is the understanding that the doctor had? Because the doctor had already interpreted me as, asexual. I mean, somebody who's not interested at all, So that's something very, very important, but I'll come to that because I just remembered, and that part should be there as to how, women with disabilities are understood by the society, and many people who are feminists also actually, tend to say that. But of course, the only thing which is very critical is that I feel that feminists would definitely listen to you, at least, whatever their questions are, but they would at least listen to you, So in ideology of ability, I actually bring in what is known as the discourses of normality, and in this normalcy, is deeply imbricated in the construction of a social world and organized relations between persons and the state, persons and institutions, and intrapsychic relations. So conversely, discourses about pathology and abnormality underpin the regulation and disciplining of subjectivities intersected with ideas about caste, gender, sexuality, class, and other identity vectors. Disability garners different negative cultural constructs or ideological categories such as ugly, old, aberrant, deformed, derailed, debilitated, feeble-minded. I remember, this is one particular example which has really stayed with me all around. I've taken my students to, mental hospital in Jaipur, and they also wanted to kind of take a little bit of a holiday. And in doing so, we were going for lunch to LMB, which is a very famous restaurant, Lakshmi Mishthan Bhandar. And we were going in, and there was a 6-year-old beggar who came and who said, "Luli, madam, tu to kuch de de." So it was very, very fascinating, when she said, "Luli, madam, tu to kuch de de," So I said, and I kind of tried to resist, and I told her, "Par main to luli nahi hu." So she said, "Nahi, tum to wheelchair mein ho, tum luli ho." मैंने कहा नहीं मैं, and I tried to kind of really go along with her. I said, हाँ ये ठीक बात है कि मैं व्हीलचेयर में हूँ, पर मैं लूली नहीं हूँ, मैं लंगड़ी हूँ. तो she said, फर्क होता है इसमें. तो मैंने कहा हाँ फर्क होता है, मैं चल नहीं सकती और लूली शायद कभी कभी उनकी जो बाजू हैं उससे वो नहीं चला सकती हैं उनको, तो उसको लूली बोलते हैं. तो फिर मैंने उसको बोला कि तुमने बोला कि see, the madam part was of course very clear. I was more privileged and looking powerful in the sense that I had my purse, I was the teacher, So in one particular sense, they kind of knew that I was more resourceful and more powerful than the others. So she said ki, but then I said कि अच्छा तू मेरे साथ बैठेगी, मैं थोड़ी सी बातचीत तेरे साथ करना चाहती हूँ, and I'll give you money, and and you can eat also. She said, yeah, money तुम जरूर दे देना, मेरे को नहीं तो खाना नहीं खाना है. मैंने कहा no, you can have food also. So then to do that, I also took a stool from a shop which was next to the restaurant, and I took that stool from that guy and the man, and we sat there. So then I said कि तूने बोला कि तू तो दे दे, तो ये कैसे क्यों कहा तुमने? तो कहने लगी कि नहीं तुम तो जानती हो ना कि तुम्हारे को, and very interestingly, she brought in the notion of karma, and she said कि तुमने तो कोई पाप किया होगा ना, कर्म नहीं कहा उसने, पाप किया, ये था, तो तुमने पाप किया होगा ना, तो इसलिए तुम्हें तो देना चाहिए. तो I kind of said that no, I really I mean मुझे नहीं लगता कि मैंने ऐसा कुछ पाप किया है, but anyways, I mean I just wanted to. So तू तो कुछ दे दे. So anyways, I started talking to her, and they said कि, तो मैंने कहा तुमने सीखा कहाँ ये जो words हैं, ये कहाँ से सीखे? तो कहती सभी बोलते हैं. तो when I said कि सभी मतलब कौन सभी? तो she said no, it's there in my chal, it's there in the television, it's there in the movies. So in one particular sense, she was trying to tell us that it is actually society in itself is using these terms, and those terms are being, and the language in that particular sense is very, very important. Now, after I finished and after I gave her money also, and I told her that you can come and eat with us, then I kind of said thank you to this man who gave us the stool, So I said that thank you so much for the stool. तो उन्होंने आगे से कहा, he said, I mean, I'm saying it in Hindi, but I can't translate it for people who don't understand Hindi, where he said that नहीं अच्छा हुआ, आज का दिन हमारा पुण्य भी हो गया. No, amazing. I mean, I like, I in one sense, I was the professor, I was teaching, I mean, I could kind of control various things, but that man actually said to me that unka, I mean, it was a good deed of the day, and I am becoming that good deed for them, because you have given me a stool, so you can look at how the societal understanding is, in one particular sense. So in one sense, where I said that disability brings in, these negative cultural constructions, I think is very, very important, and culturally generated and continued standards, such as, for instance, beauty, independence, fitness, competence, normalcy, exclude and disable many human bodies while validating and affirming others. So the disabled are deemed to fall under the category of aberrant human beings who who fail to confirm the cultural embodiment of a normal body. And as bodies interact with the socially built environments, Sangeeta ji said that, accessibility is one of, our major, concerns. And in one sense, the bodies who are disabled, they tend to interact with the social built environment and social expectations, and they expose multiple ideologies of varied degrees of disability. And out here, I want to say, I want to talk about a little bit about education in terms of COVID, and education in terms of, how, access is important. So access in terms of, like, how students come to the colleges and the universities. I mean, whether they are actually, are they, human enough, so that they can be taught, and they can be taught in every possible way. But normally we know that education has been caught between the two, sandwich between the MHRD, where you say that inclusive education is important, and the empowerment ministry, where or the Niti Aayog, where they say that of course special schools have to be there. I always have a problem with the special school, because when anybody says special, I always ask, the special in what sense? Because I think many of the teaching that has been done, that has been done at such levels in the most, you can say, in Delhi, CIE, I mean, one of the, premier institution of education. LIC is better than CIE, but CIE in particular. And we find that, there are only optional courses, which are there, in which they can teach, students with disabilities. So the very minute when you bring in the option, the idea is that these are not to be taught, elsewhere, or they would go into the, special schools, and they will be taught by them, When I bring in the COVID part, many of Delhi University students, I mean, I'm not sure about Mumbai. I think Putul or Sangeeta both can, tell me that later. But in Delhi, at least, Delhi University in particular, they did not, they said that the exams would be there in September, and they said that they would have the open book exams. Now, when the open book exams are there, the visually impaired students, either they should have, the website should be disabled friendly, which means that we must have the kind of softwares that are needed. For example, JAWS, and if you have JAWS, you can then, through hearing, you can, read everything. But not all the websites are accessible. And also at the time of COVID, the students all left the hostels as in whatever position they were, and in one sense they'd left the books also, and some of the Braille books and all were also left. And when I, came across them in Miranda House, where both girls and boys, I mean, I had just done a, I was in a webinar where I was talking about education, and they kind of said that, we are not in a position to take these exams. And they are saying that they will allow us, but they can say that you can come somewhere in October or November, where they can take the exam in the university itself. Okay. Now, in one, what is important is that some of them have got provisional admissions to places like IIT, to places like for MBA and all. But because university is not allowing them to come through this particular, issue, that where it should not be open book kind of an exam, and they can do it in another, format where they could kind of, do it. So in one sense, COVID has caught them in a problematic phase, and they all went to the court as well, wrong, and there the what the court did, court said that university, to the university, that you should be, able to do that. But, because they were fighting with each other, up till now, their education, their exams have not happened, So in one particular sense, you can see that because, there is an impact on their education in such a way that either they do not have the, and also the online classes. I think that's really very, very important for me, because I think, many of the, and I would say not only disabled, but I think non-disabled also, because I've come across, one particular, young boy who wanted to kind of, attend all the online classes. And the father actually sold the cow. He was a farmer and sold the cow and said that, I can get you the smartphone for the education. And with the disabled children, and also, the in these many categories are there. But if you look at the deaf children, because the sign language interpreter. So again, I'm coming to access. So access is not really a ramp, please. Access can be many, many things apart from, the ramp. Ramp is important, but the ramp also, sometimes the ramps are made which are, very difficult, in which, the slopes are so difficult that they cannot, but they think that it is one of the tokenism that is there. And then, of course, the softwares for the visually impaired, and of course for the, deaf people, the sign language interpreters who are needed. But I think in most universities, only visually impaired as well as mobility impaired people are, kind of educated. Deaf people are very, very few. And here I'm bringing in the women also, because, women also have to stay in, hostels which are comfortable hostels, and which are also accessible hostels. I mean, my university, which is like AUD, I mean, even though we have our vision is, of course, for equity and justice, but still, because it's a very old, environment in which came into after the engineering college was left out, and it is related with the IG people. So the hostel does not have a, I mean, there's a hostel for the girls, but disabled girls cannot go there because there are no rooms that are accessible rooms, and no toilets that are accessible toilets. So in one particular sense, again, when I said that the bodies interact with the social built environment and social expectation, they expose these multiple ideologies of varied, like I said, varied degrees of disability. So disability is more than the ideas built on the social environment that shape our understanding and perception of what it means to be able-bodied. And it is gendered as well as, and the plots with cultural ideas about gender in specific ways. For example, in case of women, they are already deemed the second sex or the other. I remember Kamlaji once, I had this, debate with her, Kamla Bhasin, where they said कि औरत होना सबसे बड़ी disability है. और I always used to say कि इसका ये मतलब हुआ कि आप, you can understand women when you understand through disability, but you are not allowing the disability to understand through women. The exchange between the two, or the, analogy that is there, in a metaphorical sense, that while women can be understood through disability, but disability is not understood through gender, through, issues of, which would be there. So the second sex or the other, and this othering is very, very important, because in the vast majority of cultures, anthropologists have studied female disability is even more poignant in that particular sense. So the ideology regarding ability preserves and validates what it means to be normal by limiting women to certain normal standards, that disability provides for able-bodied. For example, cultural capital to those who can claim such status and who can reside within these subject positions. For example, I mean, even though that man called me, said that that it is a good deed of the day, but still, if you were to kind of, understand me, obviously I am privileged, and I am, in one particular sense, the cultural capital is there with me in one particular sense, and many of the disabled also, but it's not there with everyone. And that is something which we need to, kind of, highlight. Can I have a glass of water? Can you just give me 2 minutes, please? Can you just give me 2 minutes, please?
Sure, sure, definitely.
Yeah. So, so the ideology regarding ability, no, I've said that. So in other words, the ideology about disability and in that particular sense, the opposite, the disability, produces more disabilities and conforms to the binary normative standard of ability versus disability. And when I say binaries, I want to kind of really say that the normal versus abnormal binary is profoundly interwoven into the existing power and privilege. The construction of normalcy rationalizes and reinforces the marginalization and othering of bodies, mind, affect, and sexualities that do not fit into a particular culture's imaginary of the ordinary, everyday, or acceptable. The withholding of diversity, the fact that we all are different and we all should be, can be understood in a different way, and the disavowal of potential futures and notion about the imperfectibility of the human, and I would say women more so, are infused with fears about disability. And disability conversations are thus pervasive, is invariably normalized, and ranges from ideas of ideal bodies, ideal relations, ideal psyche, ideal institution, as well as the nation in that particular sense. And the very fact that when we, the Honorable Prime Minister, used the word, Divyang, many of our, many of disabled people, both men and women, do not like the idea of Divyang, because Divyang means that you are inspirational. And if we are thinking of inspirational, that means that we are, there is no playing field for us. We will be able to do everything on our own, and disability in that particular sense can be understood as kind of discourse that generates an ideology of ability, concept as an outcome of how an ideology is created in a particular cultural and social context. I want to give another example out here. When I was very young, I would, now I'm on the wheelchair, but I used to wear my calipers and I would have my crutches, and I would want to go to the toilet. I was in a inclusive school, in the sense that, the other girls were also able-bodied. I was the only one who was, who had polio at that time, but was taken in by the school. So the class teacher, when I, used to say that I have to go to the toilet, she always used to imagine as if I am going to, take time out, in that particular sense. And every time I want to go to the toilet because of that. So when I used to, and she was so strict that she wouldn't really, give me the opportunity of kind of, going, and the fact that it will take time, because it was at one corridor and the toilet was there. So one day when I asked her, she said, no, you can't. And then I think the students who were there, they said that Anita is really troubled, ma'am. Why don't you let her go? Now by the time I reached, I soiled in midst, on the corridor itself, and when, she came to know, and my principal also came, of course, she kind of scolded her. But what the teacher did? The teacher, when I reached the class, and of course, they, cleaned me up, and there was a, a lady who used to take care of, the young girls out there. And when I came, she made all these students, you remember there was that old poem, which was, shame, shame, Poppy, shame, all the children know your name. And in front of everyone, she actually did that, and she made them. And the students were not really willing to, but she was scolding them that, why, this is how she will, learn. And that is where she should be told that she can only go to the toilet during the break and not any other time. So can you imagine that, the teaching was also done in such a terrible way that I was feeling so ashamed, and many people have had such experiences, and this is where, this was a woman teacher saying to another, young girl. So you can understand that it's not that only in a patriarchy only men are, actually creating these. There are also, the so-called, normal women also are belong to the patriarchal class, where, they are, of course, going against, uh, women who have been identified as, the disabled, because they have a lack, and they are not, and the words also, like, the bechara, langri, andha, bera, pagal, now all such words are there that are so very common, I mean, which are used. Of course, we have attempted to kind of, fight out the language also. And yet, language is never, there are many who would use it as differently challenged, differently abled. Now, I would say everybody is challenged differently. Everybody is differently abled, where Sangeeta might have the skill to kind of do something else, and I might have the skill to, like, I, as when I had drawing in my school, I couldn't draw a straight line, even when I used to kind of, measure zero point 0.5 centimeters and 0.5 centimeters in the middle and the end, only then I would go. So I was so bad at drawing, but I was good in my, other courses. So it's not as if, you can be differently abled in that particular sense, because everybody can be, everybody has a different ability, and everybody should be valued in a particular way. But for disabled women, this is where it was there. What 2 or 3 points that I want to state for women with disabilities? Of course, same things apply to women with disabilities, about education also, about access also. But, specifically for women, which is very, very important, is that one is that, for example, when they say that marriage and, motherhood, these are the issues that actually don't, it's almost as if disabled women do not have the say in these things. It's only when some people, might get married, and some people might, have children. I, as a young, adult in college, once I actually said that nobody ever whistled at me, Now I would actually cry blue murder if my students were to be, whistled at. But at that time, I realized that somewhere they were, I mean, desexualizing me. I mean, abuse can come, violence can come, but they were, as a woman, I was being desexualized because I felt that nobody ever whistled at me. Another feature which is very, very important is that many of the, and I want to kind of, also bring in somewhere a little bit of the media also, which is there. And I remember that a movie which I think everybody liked, Tare Zameen Par, was Aamir Khan's movie. And I thought that, I mean, many people liked it, but I had some problems with the movie. And in the evening, when I'd seen that movie, I think one day and next day, the mother called me up and said that, I just feel that my daughter is not really going to do anything. She was dyslexic. So I said, but why? I mean, like, so she said, no, because my daughter doesn't even paint. Now, can you imagine? The movie was ending up with the fact that, painting is because for Ishan, the child who's there, who's not studying and who's brought into a special school, the hostel where they were, and Amir Khan is himself dyslexic. But the idea that the audience is actually looking at it, once again the competition is very clearly on. And similarly, I mean, because I'm an activist also, so the mother, another mother called, I think at that time or later, that I don't remember. But, she said that I want to get a hysterectomy for my, daughter. So I said that, but she has a right, no? So, I mean, like, for this. So she said, yeah, but I'm only looking after her. And, if she gets, raped or abused, then she would have a child. And then I would have had to look after both of them, which is why I want to actually get a hysterectomy done. Now, while I do accept the fact that support systems are not there, and because the support systems are not there, we are not sure that we are, we can look after our and the mother who's a homemaker, who also is kind of caregiver, and of course feminists would understand what caregiving issue is there. Though I have another point which I would say that, but here I felt that in one sense they were legitimizing abuse for women with disabilities, because they kind of accepted the fact that abuse will happen, but what they don't want is that they should not have, they should not become pregnant. Okay. And the third part, which of course Veena ji would remember, I think, this hysterectomy actually happened because in Pune in '94, I remember, and there was a real campaign at that time by the women's movement and the feminists, where 14 girls who were intellectually impaired, who were not given the for the sanitary napkins for menstruation. So now when the sanitary napkin is not there, and they would not let the girls, they've taken the cord with them, so they couldn't tie up the pajama. So when they are when they have
Yeah. Please mute her. Yeah. Sorry,
okay?
Dr. Ghai. Yeah,
no,
now it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So when they so when they had periods, obviously blood would be there, no? So blood would be there in the room, but because they thought that this has happened, so the hospital actually did 14 hysterectomies, for these girls who were intellectually impaired. And they didn't do that to the boys. I mean, I'm not saying that they should have done it to the boys, but because they felt that the women are, obviously this is something which they will go through, and because they are not, they're doing this to get the menstrual hygiene, and that much they wouldn't do. So I think that is something which is very, very serious kind of a point. And of course, in the 2016 bill, which was there, a lot has been said about that, but still, how support is there, and what, the mothers who are caregivers do it, then I think it becomes very, very difficult. When I talk about the care, I mean, I do understand that there is no payment, for the caregivers. Caregivers do it for their grandparents, for their mother-in-laws, for their daughters who have disability, and who have other issues. But I think one thing which is not taken up is that a caregiver is important, is critical, but how the recipient, and especially I would say, how a woman is trying to say this to the mother, that what care do I want? Have you ever asked me that question? And that becomes very, very important. I did this research project in Teen Murthy when I was there for 2 years as a fellow, and I worked on care, and I tried to look at the mothers and I tried to look at the daughters, and there was so much ambivalence, in both the mothers as well as the daughters, despite the fact that even the daughters know that they can't go anywhere without them, and the mothers also in a way are caring for them. But I think what we need to understand is, and from a disability activist, I would say that the best idea would be to actually say that this is like interdependence, and it's not as if the recipients will not do anything for the mothers and the mothers will not do anything for the daughters. But the idea that care in itself has to be understood as interdependent. After all, if we all, I mean, the very fact that we are here, I'm talking to you all, you are in Mumbai, Vinaji somewhere else, and different places. And yet, because of the technology, we are in a position to be able to interact with each other. And we there are times when we need a PowerPoint, we need a pen, we need a laptop and all. So in that particular sense, I think we must talk about the interdependence, the fact that there is, this, interdependence which is with each other, and we must, women in that particular sense, could be, understood. I think the last thing which I should say about disability is about the abortion. Because I think as a woman, as a disabled woman, I still feel that every woman has a right to abort, right? But in the latest MTP in 2020 thing, that they have increased the weeks. They've made it from 20 to 24, but they have very clearly indicated that the disability part, that a disabled fetus can be aborted, is almost like moving towards eugenics, that where it is better to be dead than alive. So, and if you look at the data will tell you that 0.3 to 0.3% or 5% actually are heredity associated, disabilities. The rest of the disabilities can happen where we think about landmines, we think about, pellets in Kashmir, we can think about, natural, disasters and man-made disasters. We can think about, the bomb blast. We can think about, all, something like a flooding. We can think about COVID, Now, all these are where it is not as if, disability has happened only to people who were born with disability. Disability can happen to you anytime at any particular juncture and any country. I mean, disability can happen to anyone. Okay. So I think a human being in that particular sense is able only when she or he fits into the category of what it means to be an able human being. And if one does not fit into that category, one is considered as abnormal, not fully human, different or deviant, or like I said, othered, and therefore disabled, being fallen from the baseline of the humanness. I think that is something which is very, very important. Maybe I should just simply, how much time I have?
Anita, you still have some time. You still have time.
So I think the issues that I kind of, highlighted, I have done many, but I mean, I would just, so I kind of say that body, care, embodiment, motherhood, marriage, sexuality, health, family. Now, family, the data that, although of course it's disaggregated data, we don't get all the data. for people with disabilities, for women with disabilities, but whatever data that we have, it's always, the rape happens not from outside. It can happen from outside for the able-bodied, of course, but mostly there are familial issues which are there, and those familial issues are very important because there are many who are abused from the home itself. So there's an uncle who's kind of, a mama who's abused a niece, and so on and so forth, and there can be many examples. So I feel that family also, the myth of the beautiful, athletic, or the perfect body defines the impaired body as unacceptable and undesirable. When you go to mythology, you look at the roots of such thinking, which are always found in, instances where Lakshman, Ram's brother, cuts off Sharupnakha's nose, who's attracted to him. And I think the only way in which Lakshman can respond is what he defines as non-acceptable behavior by disfiguring and making her ugly, or the ugly female monster, indicates how disfiguring and by extrapolation, disability and desexing are equated in the Indian psyche, and that is something which I've said earlier also, and now again in that particular sense. Consequently, their recognition in forging that sexuality can and does play a significant role, personal and social identities are often overlooked. For embodiment, one must say that we need to understand that disability is a complex embodiment, not merely an embodiment which has only to do with body or pain or physicality, but even more as an ideology that guides human consciousness. So this form of embodiment is a form of situated knowledge, about the claims being made about and by women in a given society. So I think the standpoint theory, where, the invisibility and the silencing of the gendered experience of disability, both from disability and feminist movement in India, has led to a systematic exclusion of women with disabilities in public discourse. Though the disability movement has brought into public consciousness the discrimination faced by people with disability, it has homogenized the disabled subject as, a female or a male, thereby discounting the particular experience of women with disabilities. Because you might have noticed that many of the, of course, gender is there for males also, but the males, actually get to, even if when they're disabled, if they are from a, middle class or a better kind of a category, they tend to marry poor girls who are able-bodied. So in one sense, the disabled girls are left alone in that particular this thing. And I'm not really suggesting that the marriage should be between only two disabled people or two able people, because that would be, politically would not be a correct way to understand. But the idea that, motherhood in that particular marriage in that particular sense is problematic is always there. I also want to, some of you might remember that in Chandigarh, there was, a Nari Niketan, where two guards raped the mental age was 9 years old, but she was about 13 or 14 years old, and she and became pregnant, and it went on to Supreme Court and all that. And of course, the counseling and all happened. And in that, the court had allowed them to have a baby. Now, the idea is there were many, disabled women also who were against this idea. And there were many who said that, no, I mean, if she's agreeing, if she's wanting this, then she should be, allowed to have this child. And, and I can say for sure that they are, both of them, happy with each other, the child and the, young mother who was there. But the fact that she was raped in a Nari Niketan itself, I think that is indicative of how women with disabilities are actually understood in society. I think in a culture where being a daughter is considered a curse, being a disabled daughter is a fate worse than death, for she has to contend with both her role as a daughter, when what was desired was a son, and with her disability. So the desire for sons has to be understood in context of the ritual value of sons, as well as the social and economic burden in bringing up daughters, which of course is very, very clearly there in our culture. And sex selection could be one, very, very important example that can be there. So a culture in which arranged marriages are the rule, it puts disabled women in a difficult position. While there is a possibility of resistance, however difficult it might be, it is there. To this cultural arrangement, the normal women, arrangement for the normal women for disabled girls is an uphill task. Some disabled girls in the rich or the middle class might be able to negotiate the difficulties inherent in the arranged marriages, albeit with a great deal of compromising. And disabled sons, however, retain the possibility of marriage, as they are not gifts but the receivers of the gift. I would now go into the COVID part, because COVID is very, very important. Whatever the first and the foremost thing which comes to my mind is that while because the online is so very, Facebook as well as, social media is, critical, and you can get all the information. I came across the first, example, which was there in America, where the doctor said that if this particular person is disabled, then the ventilator should be given to a able-bodied person, and why the disabled people should actually get the ventilator. Now this, to begin with, I remember going up to India Today to say this. And the problem which is there in COVID is that how we have thought about, and specifically I would say women with disabilities and men also, where we say that, we have not thought, because we have, disability. So disability is the global categorization. So we have not thought about the fact that we also could be, we could also have the virus. Now, to the fact that you can get the virus, have we ever asked this question, whether the hospitals are disabled friendly, whether the toilets in the hospitals are disabled friendly? And also the issue of care comes up again. For 1 week, on 13th March, I came back from the university and from the hospital, because I had gone for getting my checkups done. And we came to know that now we cannot go to the university. By that time, they said that you take it as a holiday and the classes will begin from 31st March or whatever. But by that time, on 22nd, the lockdown was there. And when the lockdown was there, the maid also, who helps me, I've had her for almost 26 years, but who couldn't, come. And because I am independent in my house, so I do need some help. I can do some things, but I can't do everything. So the problem was that how to get her, and the care pass which was there, it was there only for the, people, support people, people like nurses, doctors and all, whosoever were there. But for the disabled people, it was not there. So I had to put in a, I had to write to the Disability Commissioner of Delhi, and I had to kind of, ask them that what is going to happen to us, how are we going to live, in this particular lockdown. So then, of course, they said, first they insisted that you must get a maid who stays with you so that she doesn't come and go. Now, my maid, of course, had a young son. And I said that, how can I tell her to come to my place and not look after her own family? But what I can do is that I can ask her to come every alternative day. And at least, there would be some kind of a, help which is there. But it took them almost a week or so. By that time, they had the care pass, which then happened for Bombay also and all other places. But the idea that we're visually impaired, even for protection, things like washing hands or social distance. Now, many of the visually impaired, also the mobility impaired people, actually need assistance from others. So whether social distancing can happen or not is also very, very critical, which is there in the COVID times, and how you can kind of, whether the cane can go to all, for example, even if you have to go and buy the groceries, whether the grocery is disabled friendly or not. And also when I mean, of course, I didn't want to get out because I have comorbidities also, so I didn't want to get out. So when I would call the grocery person, he said that if you can buy more than 2,000, only then you would get the stuff. But the silver line was only one, that, there was, from the NGOs, there was a group that was made where, they actually would, take things and bring the groceries to the people with disabilities. But accessibility has been a precondition to, I think, people who are in, the COVID times. And the data which was there, we found out that, there were 82 participants who actually gave their, information. So 75 out of the 82 participants who identified as deaf, blind, and hard of hearing faced access barriers with regard to information, physical spaces, to communication, to digital spaces, and to health spaces, health services, and to food and essentials, and to remote and urban areas. For example, I want to say out here that most of, if you have been watching television and if you watch them carefully, you will see that many, I mean, I'm not really trying to, say anything negative for, the government or anyone in particular. But the reason is that, where I would look at, the UK president, prime minister, the New Zealand prime minister, and many others, when they were talking, the sign language interpreter was always there. But in India, our prime minister, whenever he was trying to tell us anything, the sign language interpreter was not there. So once again, this was really the information that's coming through the television. I mean, and how deaf people are watching that, but they cannot really, listen to whatever instructions are being given to them. I think many friends who I had are disabled friends told me that everything is shut in one sense. And I really did not know, actually at that time, this is a deaf girl who said that. Now, that I did not know what the problem was, but later I learned on the news, which is a news channel for the deaf community. And in the starting, I was told to stay back at home. And that is, they just said, if you if you go out, you will die. So in that particular sense, there were many problems which were there. And participants always rely on the lip reading, and they reported extensive and necessary use of masks, which they would wear. And when you are using lip reading and you are wearing the mask, then it is becoming a problem. I mean, the access problem is becoming further for the deaf people. And I think with regard to digital access, I've already said that the blind participants reported that not all applications and all websites follow the what is called as the web content accessibility guidelines, which make digital spaces accessible. Even the Arogya Setu app is actually not accessible for people with disability. This is one of the most important apps, which everybody said that we must always use that. And there are guidelines being circulated, which is not accessible for blind people. It's a scanned document in PDF format, document, and this is not readable by the screen readers. They should be following the web content, like I said, guidelines. A 31-year-old blind woman, who kind of said that I will not be able to go anywhere. And the personal mobility of many participants relied on the interdependence with the community, which was complicated by enforcing these norms on social distancing. Like this one said, the girl, I had gone to buy some ration, and there my crutches slipped. I fell down. In normal times, someone definitely used to come or pick me up if this sort of a thing happened. But that day, no one came. Then I took out my sanitizer from my purse and gave it to the shopkeeper, and then he came and helped me get up. So you can imagine that, situations were so very problematic. I also want to bring in the pensions, I mean, as the finance minister was, trying to give, whatever to, the migrant, to other people, to the farmers, to the disabled, they gave 1,000 rupees in 3 installments, Now, most of them actually could not get that money because, going 3 times to the same place, I mean, where the bank, and many of the banks are not accessible, and they also experience this whole thing about the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana scheme, in which this 1,000 had come. And another girl who actually said that I get rupees 700 per month as pension. What can I do with so little? I need to buy medicines, food, clothes. It's not enough. I have to buy things on credit. I have spent all my pension. This was a 29-year-old blind woman from Orissa. And, I think the online delivery services and many other problems which were there were really, very, very clearly, problematic. And the social protection schemes, where their own inbuilt barriers to access for women with disabilities, who participated, who always required disability certificates, and if the disability certificate is not there, then the ration card cannot be given to the disabled person. Later, of course, some people agreed that, they should not be asked for the disability certificate or the ration card, but still the problems were there. I think another important issue is that of domestic violence. And domestic violence, I mean, where, we say that disabled women who were actually in either the hostels or in their, colleges and all, or in the schools, came back. And one particular example I remember where this girl, is beaten up by the husband. So she came home, but because the family also was poor, the family told them to go back and stay with the husband. And the husband again kind of, used to beat them up again with her child also. And also in very, very slums, where disabled people are there, if they had to report to someone like an NGO or any particular, place where they could kind of complain. But having, one room in which you have to report, and the parents are also there and others are also there, now giving that report in itself becomes very, very problematic. Now in the, corona times, I mean, when the virus is there, very few people have been able to go and get their testing done, and testing is important, but not many states have actually done this and have reached home or have sent, only Delhi's, I think, started this little later, but very few again. But where, they would bring the, bus, which was a medical kind of a bus in which testing and all was there, and also made it sure that women with disabilities and also men with disabilities would be tested at home itself, and they would, not be kind of, taken out. I think generally what I need to kind of, say in one particular sense, uh, it's not as if able-bodied people in the COVID times are not, experiencing problems. Many people are experiencing problems. But when it comes to issues of employment, and employment, of course, for the able-bodied is also problematic, but employment for the disabled becomes very, very serious. And how they can kind of, even if they were on rent, they were thrown out of the, the landlord. I mean, they threw the disabled people, and both women and men. And, it was very difficult for them to kind of, go home and go to the village if they were in Delhi. I don't know about Bombay, but this is what happened. And also, I mean, one particular example that happened from the migrant, the migrant actually wrote a letter where he said, it's one of the place in Delhi, where he said that I have stolen your cycle. I have stolen your cycle because I have a disabled child, and I have to, I could have walked, but my child cannot walk, and I have to use the cycle to take him there. In that particular sense, I think, can you imagine that what would be the impact that was there on the parents as well, when you are going off from, when the migrants had to leave, the states, and where they found that they have no money, no food, and no health state. So all these issues are very seriously there. And I think emotionally also, and health-wise also. I mean, I suppose women with disabilities in this time, where they're alone in their, or they're in the families, or are in their own houses, the problems are very, very serious. And many of them have, indicated that how living is so difficult for us, because we will not be able to either get the money or get the groceries or get the, again, the protections that are there. So I think the time which is there, but more so when the information also was not being given to them, whatever important information is there. For example, like in Delhi, they could have said that you can come to the schools and you can stay there and we would look after you. But how to look after, and how transportation in itself would be important for them. I think it was mentioned here also, when the teachers have been asked to be there on for duty. But when you are on duty, disabled women, how do they reach out there is one of the serious problem which is there. I think I will stop here, and then maybe there are questions that can be answered. But I can just conclude by saying that, Bell Hooks used to say that colonialism doesn't happen only from someone who is doing it outside the country. Colonialism can happen in our own country also, because the class factor is also very important, and also the difference that disability carries with it also is very, very, it creates vulnerability, and the humane part which is there is never understood in that sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this insightful lecture and so many important concepts which you have brought forth or highlighted. To begin the analogy of how women can be understood through disability, but disability cannot be understood through gender, or the dichotomy wherein how disabled women are desexualized, but at the same time, society does accept that a disabled woman can be sexually abused, or even the abuse at the rehabilitation homes or even at homes. And the challenges of the differently abled people, especially during COVID, both physical and the emotional, and how day-to-day functioning has got impacted. So thank you for this powerful lecture. We do have a few questions lined up. We'll start one by one, so that so first you did mention in your this that getting the benefits was difficult from the government because it was only 1,000 rupees, and that too in 3 installments. But there, we have one question which Natty has asked: how do people? What is the experience in accessing government schemes for people with different who are differently abled?
No, see, basically, I think there are many. The policy has many things, but the implementation, I'm not sure, because we always, like I mentioned, that the data is always not there, and the disaggregated data is there. I mean, so it is very difficult to say whether the schemes are really reaching them or not reaching them. Is a very important question that we need to, I mean, I wouldn't be able to get you the data on that, because it's very difficult, and we do not know how many people have experienced this, are vulnerable and are not being able to kind of, get the things.
Thank you. We have, I think Professor Veena Punacha also wants to further comment on the talk on about how disabled fetuses and how they are aborted, especially. Veena, yeah, can you?
Thank you very much, Anita, for your truly wonderful talk. It is, I understand, a deeply felt pain with which you have discussed issues. And at the same time, as I have remarked in my chat, that it is also based on sound theoretical understanding of issues. It's a wonderful talk. I appreciate it a great deal. The point I wanted to make is also how the commercialization of the woman's body takes place under surrogate motherhood. Because one of the studies which was conducted recently by one of my students, these women who are contracted to become mothers are forced to go through repeated abortions because it's for the parent who's the contracting parents who would perhaps decide what kind of a baby they want. So, and not only that, there's also a question of genetic pre-testing. So the woman is pregnant, she's forced to undergo testings and then aborted. The fact that she's gone through a high dose of hormones being injected into her body so that she becomes pregnant and she's not paid. In this commercial transaction, she does not get paid if the fetus or the biological material is not, it's not an end product. So that means she's subjecting her body to repeated hormones, yeah, and various kinds of experimentation, and perhaps not get paid. So it's a very, very exploitative relationship in there.
No, and also, I mean, I would like to know where the study is. That is very important. But I think you're
yeah, it's in SNDT. It's in our it would be in our PhD section, and it is perhaps kept in RCWS too.
Oh, okay. But what I kind of understand is that the whole idea of selection, and even when you take up the human genome research and all, the idea of enhancement, that you can enhance, now, but enhancement means that you can become from disabled to normal, in that particular sense. So you are still actually, playing the same game of technology, where you can say that, well, I'm a wheelchair user, but I want to now get bionic legs, so that I can walk the way I, can. But that in itself, again, is trying to create the same issue. That means that we will have to be, somewhere normal in
yes.
that sense. And that is something which is a very serious one.
And also the point you made is a wonderful point about each one being so special. I mean, each human being so special. And perhaps in a society which was less consumerist, less individualistic, where it was based on more communitarian values, people's different needs perhaps was taken care of in a more stable social environment, so that it wasn't such a trauma for them to fit into a norm.
And also, I think, I mean, this is there for the able-bodied women, young women also, when I'm teaching the students. I mean, this whole thing about the beauty, I mean, like a zero size and all that. And many of the disabled cannot get these, kind of things, and yet the internalized oppression is always there, that
exactly.
How we can be them. I think there's a question out here from Nutan. As you had given an example of man would prefer marrying a poor woman rather than a disabled one, by the same analogy, that wouldn't marry a sex worker, so she too fails in the disabled category by the same logic. Yeah, I mean, so that is where, but I was very happy because Meenu was telling me when I met her last that there were at least 3-4 sex workers who were actually mobility impaired, but they were the sex workers. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not going into that. But the fact that they could resist and they could say that we can be, we can earn through this particular way. And that was, I think, very, very nice, which is a video which Meenu has made. I don't have it, but that's a good thing to kind of, know.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Anita. It is a choice if it is a choice. But we also don't know what kind of oppressive or exploitative relationship she has to live in just because she is disabled. How much more physically vulnerable she must be. I mean, we need to look at it from that angle as well.
Sure. And also,
and I'm not sure the choice in which case, because we don't know what.
I think because I didn't go into abortion that much, but the word choice in itself is problematic.
Yeah,
do we have a choice? I mean,
who has a choice? I agree with you entirely.
What are the kind of choices?
I agree, but vulnerabilities, when they are very vulnerable.
I agree with you. No, except that, what I'm trying to say is that at least the usual pattern changes, But yes, if they are looked after, because it's in Sangram, so, and one of the students had done
that is different. That's a different situation.
But still, I think one has to kind of, rework on, these things and reflect on what it is. Yes.
Because the law, One more
Dr.
question.
Ray,
Go back to your point,
talk about
Anita.
Huh? Sorry?
You had brought in this issue about what happened in the Pune ashram. I remember all of us writing and protesting about it. And the issue was really state patriarchy, which was coming into play because the state took the decision, arrogated for itself the role of a guardian.
But from what I remember, this thing was that when all women's movement, really, it was on the headlines and all, you know, because it happened, it was stopped. So in that particular sense, I think the solidarity that is always needed has to be there in that.
That is true.
There is, Dr. Ghai, can you please talk about the Disability Act? Yeah, so the, especially the mapping of categories. Now, see, for example, now they have taken 21 disabilities, you know. Now you think that you have, the country has the resources to deal with 21 disabilities, first of all. But the fact, the advantage which is there, I mean, I look at it like that I look at it, although I can tell you, once again, I mean, I might, I mean, it's not a political, whatever response, but I will still tell you that at the time when the chaos was there and, you know, Parliament was not really functioning actually, that they decided that, but they, all the parties decided that at least let the disability bill be passed, you know. So 2016, for the debate was for 10 minutes. And in the 10 minutes, the only thing which was asked was that how many reserved, I mean, first there were 3% reserved, you know, in the post and in other things like colleges and all that. And now they've made it 5. So that is the only question that was asked, but nothing was asked. And even now, like, you know, I mean, I should say that because we had brought a punitive angle into that, we had said that if you don't follow, like, you know, even for excess and all, if you don't follow the, you know, this thing, then it should be punitive. So the government actually brought in an amendment and said that they had to take off the punitive part away. But I'm so glad, so very glad that the disability sector fought and the government had to take it back, you know. So that is the best part. But in the mapping of the, you know, categories, I mean, there are 21. And in the 21, how would you understand that what can be given and how much, what are the pensions? The basic pension is actually 300 rupees per month. Now in 300 rupees per month, how much can you, you know, live? And also in many of the, you know, categories, the administrative work has not been done up till now, you know, and only when the administrative work is done and it goes from, you know, the state and the disability commissioner is there and all. But, you know, the problem is that how do we look after so many of the categories that are there? Because I feel that at least, you know, by way of education and all, many things can be removed if we were to kind of, you know, teach them in a way where they all can be taught, and the cognitive style can be different, you know, and we all teachers know that if we need a cognitive style, we can teach in a different way as well. But it is the, you know, the vision which is important, and secondly, what is important is whether the understanding of disability, and this is where I need to kind of say, and I, which is very important for me to say this, that, you know, I feel that disability studies should not be understood as a concessional category. Disability study should be understood as an epistemology, as knowledge construction, you know, because if knowledge construction is there, then I think there are chances, you know. Veena ji would remember that gender studies or women's studies only came up in late 70s, right? First, it was only activism, you know, the curriculum and the academia only came up later. So like women's studies are there for, disability as well. I feel that disability study programs, academic programs should be there so that they can learn much more, and that's how they can kind of, proceed further. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Can you hear? Are you
Now
able to?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, Anita,
Now,
what I'm trying to add here, just a little bit of an information. It was SNDT, and in 1962, Neera Desai started the first course on sociology of women. 1962, and of course, RCWS is the first women's studies center in the country, and of course, the pioneer of women's studies. It took a full 10 years before other institutions took up women's studies. And the important thing, to go back to Neera Desai, I'm only adding this little bit. The important thing about her was that she pointed out the problems in education philosophy and issues like that. Because on the one hand, education is supposed to make you independent, autonomous, and yet where women are concerned, you're supposed to be relational, family oriented. So the contradictions, the innate contradictions that educated women face is what she wanted to highlight. That's how the sociology of women came in.
yeah.
Any other questions here?
Yes, we have one question from Rohini where she's saying, how long do you think it will take to have a disabled-friendly infrastructure?
I will die up till that time, I think. But I'm hoping that at least there would be a disabled-friendly infrastructure, because I think only when we have, it shouldn't be that only disabled people are working on it. If you look at it, you can see for the senior people, steps. Aren't they difficult for them? You can also think about, cataract. You can think about, hearing aids. You can think about arthritis. You can think about, Parkinson. You can think about Alzheimer. All these things are there. But because we imagine that this is only because they are aged and whatever, but if had it been there, then I think everybody would be able to use it, But when it is made special for disabled, then I think that's not done. But I think now at least the universities, largely, of course, the government universities are now supposed to actually have, accessible features in almost all the universities. But I'm not sure, again, it comes to the point where they will say that, well, the implementation did not take place. But when I used to work with Professor Adil Sadgopal, and when I did education, of children with disabilities in various villages and all, he always used to say that what is not there, when people say formal education, they also write informal education, which means that you are already giving the answer, and the answer should be only formal education and not non-formal education. So like that, inclusive education and special education. When you have both of them, then you are already saying that we will not be able to actually reach that point where all have been done. So infrastructure is important, but I would kind of say, I have this kind of a understanding that of course, I am with the disabled people. So whatever is there, we really talk about. But I think talking to converted should not be there. It is for people who really do not know anything about disability should be there, so that they could become ambassadors for all of us, and the solidarity in that particular sense might be able to create infrastructure that's not only a disabled friendly, that's a human infrastructure where each person can, use that in that particular sense.
Thank you. Can we take one more question? I had it because when disabled people are fighting for their rights, we also see that fully able children or students are lining up at government hospitals to get that certificate so that they get this extra time during the exams. And so what is your take on
No,
it?
because that is, I think, if there are problems, because even in the board, class 12 board, either a scribe can be given or, extra time can be given. So that I think is, it depends upon what the disability is. So half an hour or 1 hour, whatever it is, that should be given for them to complete their papers. So when they have, but it depends upon what kind of disability. For example, if I was a student, I don't need extra time. I mean, I have to write, people who are mobility, impairment is there, we don't. But if the scribe is not there, I mean, I remember, Veena ji, you would remember that when you had written to me, there were these 16 students who were not being given the scribes.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
finally we got it done, in
Yes,
that
we
sense.
did.
The
And
committee
they
yeah.
did need, because they did have
Yeah.
certain.
I remember you wrote to me and then we kind of did this. But I think scribes in that particular sense are important. So that extra time need to be given to them. But for some disabilities, like I said, mobility, I mean, nothing is wrong with my hands, right? So of course I can write it in whatever is the given time. So it should be looked at what disabilities actually ask for. Then I think we should do that. And that's
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this session. I think we have taken all the questions that the participants had. So thank you so much. Dr. Putul Sate, may I now request you to
Yeah.
give a vote of thanks?
Yeah. I think there's some problem with the video. Anyway, Dr. Guy, thank you very much. In fact, there was a request from one of our students in the chat box where she's asking you that can she join you for your other online lectures also.
yeah, sure.
So whenever you have it, you can just send us the link. Yeah, I can post it here because I think it is there in the chat box. She's asking whether she can join you. I would just like to.
You can write my, I'll write my email number.
Yes, you can just write it in the chat box. So then, I mean, anybody, because there are many people have, I mean, there's a lot of appreciation. So I'm sure many would like to get in touch with you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. There's this, in fact, as you were asking about what is the CNET SNDT, in fact, I was just thinking that we have visually impaired students for the arts course, and especially for music, I don't know why, but in music, we have had students who were visually this impaired and they have done really very well. And at our Churchgate library, we also have that software for them, but that's it. But nice. On yeah, they do have, but that was also because NAC was coming and extra points was there for that, so that is why you needed to, I mean, that's very, I mean, that tokenism, that the fact
whatever it is, at least something has been done.
So that was there, but apart from that, I don't think we are in any way disabled friendly, in spite of the fact that Veena is also there, that we have the first special education department, and I mean, even if you tell them that, this is not a right term and it's a very regressive term. And in fact, I had basically asked them to come for the lecture today, but I mean, they don't feel the need to engage with all these debates. And sadly speaking, they have this school also where they're mostly taught how to make candles and paint and all these things. Veena, you must have seen it also, right? Our special education department.
No, but I must add also, Putul, this was really a pioneering effort by SNDT.
Yes. But it was, but now if you see,
I remember when Smriti Swaroop was there, especially, and I do know how they helped. They gave it special coaching because we had a stenotypist in our department whose daughter had special needs. She did so well through their coaching and through the open school system, she was marginally,
Yeah.
you know, and later she went on to doing her regular 12th standard exam, went on to Nirmala Niketan, did her and went on to doing MSW as well.
Well, okay,
And
but that,
her strength was in her fieldwork ability, which is
right.
required under social work, because she was very empathetic to the children with
Yeah,
special needs.
yeah, but
So there's been a lot of good done in
yeah,
SNDT. We had the limitations of funds,
we
I
had the
agree.
limitations. Yeah, anyway, I
And
think,
SNDT, I mean, to add one more thing about SNDT is, if you remember, Putul, we had a lecturer, disabled, visually impaired lecturer also in the music department.
yeah, he's still there. In fact, no, but
Oh, yeah.
now he has retired. Now he has retired. Now he
Yeah, I
has
remember
retired.
there was a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
case of
yeah,
sexual
he was, and
harassment
they used to help
against.
him. In fact, the students used to help him a lot. I think he has retired a few years back.
This is also a problem. I'm so happy you reminded me of this, Anita, because this person, I was on that committee, so I do know. He was accused by a whole lot of students of sexually harassing them.
Yeah, yeah.
But, because and there was enough evidence for it, there were written complaints by students, but the university did not take action against him for two reasons. One is because of his special needs, and the second is that because of his caste status. So the university didn't want to get into that terrain. The problem here is, what about the moral responsibility of people? I mean, they may be disabled, but they are human beings, and like everybody else, they have to stand by a moral code or ethical code, shall we say. How would you say react to that kind of a situation?
I think whenever there is such a case, I mean, I feel some punishment is required.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, just because they're disabled, that doesn't mean that you can do anything. I mean, that
Exactly.
I would not agree with that.
I know the university didn't want to enter that terrain. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, I think so. And I think anyway, so on behalf of the Research Center for Women's Studies, I thank Dr. Ghai. Thank you very much. In fact, you have always, you have basically always responded to our call. I must say, whenever we have asked you, you have very graciously, you have been always there. Thank you. And in future also, I hope that we get more chance to interact with you in future. Yeah. So thank you very much, and I thank all the participants also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita, for your wonderful lecture.
Yeah, it was a wonderful lecture. Yes.
And thank you so much.
It was very well done. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Dr.